20 teams enter, only 5 will move on. We are ready for the first 2 events for the teams at the Atlas Games as we continue to get closer to Madison, Wisconsin and the 2021 Noble CrossFit Games. I'm Sean Woodland with Andy Sakamoto. The front runners for the teams, the top seeds coming out of quarterfinals, going into the semifinals. It's CrossFit Resurrection, Pro1 Montreal. They have some games experience, 1855, Team Coda, and Novative Lab. Your first event, it's all synchro and all 4 athletes work together at the same time. 3 rounds of synchro thrusters, synchro chest and bar pull-ups, and synchro bar facing burpees. 85 pounds for the women, 115 pounds for the men. And it's Pro1 Montreal. They go out and they demolish this thing. They win event 1 with a time of 6 minutes, 39 seconds.
And it's not that surprising, Sean, considering this is a multi-year games team and definitely one of the favorites going into this weekend. But like you said, this is 45 reps a round that these athletes are having to synchronize. Obviously, kind of the answer to not being able to utilize the worm in these semifinals events. And 6:39 to synchro up all those reps is highly impressive.
The only team to go sub-7 is Pro1 Montreal. CrossFit Resurrection is in second, 1855 at 7:22. They lock up a third. Overall standings after one event for that win, Pro1 Montreal has 100 points. Resurrection is 5 points back of them, and then 1855 that sits in third. Event 2, a much longer event, and the teams break up into male and then female pairs. It's an up and back chipper featuring 4 movements: the synchro dumbbell shoulder to overheads, the synchro dumbbell deadlifts, the synchro GHDs, and then those synchro single arm dumbbell overhead squats right in the middle, and then they work their way back through and they tag the next team, the next pair to go. This one, man, you talk about synchronization and all those movements, they are tough to handle.
Right, there really needs to be great communication between the team members on this event, and especially because, as we saw last weekend, there's a lot of no rep possibilities, and you don't want to be, flirting the line with either no reps or not communicating with your team member and somebody going and somebody waiting. So a lot of opportunities for some seconds to be added.
Let's get to our featured matchup for team event number 2. Chase Ingram and Tanya Wagner have the call, and as always, they begin with the box assignments presented by CBD-MD.
Team event number 2 taking the screen. Your top 6 teams after event number 1. Left to right, Pro1 Montreal, CrossFit Resurrection, 1855, bottom row, C2X CrossFit, followed by Novative Lab and Rhapsody. Your top 6 teams after event number 1 as we move into this long chipper style. Pairs of same-sex men and women with some more synchro work, Tanya. Looking at this event, knowing what we've come off of already in event number 1, how does this different than between the 2?
This one really is going to be similar to the individuals, all about how you get through those single arm dumbbell overhead squats, which is just a challenging movement by themselves, yet alone when you have to be synchronized with a partner of different height, possibly, and different ability levels. So that communication and being able to work together specifically on that overhead movement is going to be where we see the best teams come through and come out on top.
As we start things off, just like the individual men and women did, we have a pyramid-style chipper. 35 synchro dumbbell shoulder overhead, 35 deadlifts, 35 GHDs. Everything must be in sync. 75, 35, 35, 35. So a little less work than the individuals had, and then the women will follow behind them. Now, one thing we've really haven't done before is synchro dumbbell work in a team setting.
Typically we see the worm or different objects that are just usually you can work together a little bit more on, or we see gymnastic movements, but I really like the diversity that we're seeing of the movements synchronized, even with the GHD sit-ups, just different pieces of equipment. It really does show the depth of how well your team lives and breathes together and what you can make work together as a well-oiled machine. Just like here, CrossFit Resurrection, the middle of your screen at the top, just the way the guys transitioned, seeing how people take steps together, and really every part of the event, not just the movements, really needs to be in sync.
Teams moving into their 35 synchro GHDs. Tanya, as I said before, in the upper middle part of your screen, CrossFit Resurrection was first to get to there. If you guys look at the top of every box for all of these 6 in this grouping, you'll see a red progress bar. That designates how far they've got in the event. Once it stretches across the width of their screen, that shows that they are near or about to complete this event. Now, this is team event number 2. We've already had team event number 1, 4-person synchro work in event number 1, and now we move to pairs. And Tanya, we talked about how tough 100 single arm overhead squats were for the individuals. How about 75 synchro overhead squats for these team members?
Well, and that's just it. It really, you already have your other teammate chosen for the men and the women's side, so it's not even like you get the luxury of choosing a height advantage or any of that. So you need to stick with who you have. Your guys are going together and the girls are going together, so you have to practice this. You have to know how long it's going to take your partner to get all the way out of the squat. CrossFit Resurrection, they're looking at each other, kind of watching to make sure they're there. The fatigue is going to set in differently for the different athletes, so communication is also really important. You don't want any misreps in this movement. Anytime you have a misrep, it just throws everything off, so you need to be able to keep your pace, keep that pattern to stay in the groove.
A couple things to look at. Look at the bottom middle part of your screen, Novative Lab. Most of these other pairs are squatting on the same arm, but Tanya, as you said before, is you could have different good arms. And so you might be using different arms. So what's unique to all 6 is the bottom right side of your screen in Rhapsody. They're the only team doing a single file to where I would assume the back athlete's only job is to watch the front athlete in front of him and try to keep his cadence.
And that's where a good strategy comes into play. It kind of looks like the worm, where you have a leader calling different movements or watching or setting the speed. And my guess is that your stronger squatter is going to be in the back, just setting tempo with letting the slower athlete or the weaker athlete in that movement dictate the pace so that they don't go too fast, they don't implode and need to take a longer break than what the team really needs.
I'm actually surprised more teams aren't opting for that. There's an easier chance for you to get off cadence if you can't see each other. CrossFit Resurrection, top part of your screen, getting a little out of sync. And that's going to start to happen with fatigue. And we talk a lot about on the team side with the worm or 4-person teams is communication is obviously key. And when it comes to these synchro events, that's one of those, well, we don't want to say unspoken things that never really make their way onto the paper as one of those extra elements that you may not be prepared for unless you've practiced it.
Well, and that's the Chase, from the beginning of the times of teams, there was always that element of you never wanted to let your teammates down. And in a synchro event, when the pressure is on the athlete that needs to take the break, you always dig a little deeper. You usually tend to hold on a little longer. But in a movement that takes so much out of you, if you don't have a great position, if it is really causing a lot of torque in your back, tension in your hips that you're not used to, you're crippling yourself if you hold on too long.
We're starting to see the totality of this event, even though it is only the middle portion, start to take its toll on a lot of these teams. And your top 6 after team event number 1 for this grouping. It started with 35 dumbbells shouldered overhead into dumbbell deadlifts and GHD sit-ups. Everything must be synchronized. Tanya, as I'm looking through this, as they're working their way through these 75 overhead squats, bottom, middle, and bottom left, Novative Lab and C2X CrossFit are done, and just above them you have CrossFit Resurrection. So a very tight race at the top. In fact, the only team that isn't in it is the one that is opting for that single file style for this synchro work.
Yeah, and maybe it really did come down to, for them, the fact of their one male athlete in the front there struggling a little there with his final squat. Maybe his speed was really the speed he could handle, and that was what they had to do. But Chase, let me tell you, Pro1 Montreal, the top left of your screen, they've really been, they actually look super controlled. This is a team that's been to the game 4 times. When I saw they were in this grouping, I wanted to keep my eye on them. They look really composed. Even coming off the squats, they just casually went to the GHDs, knowing what's ahead of them. But remember, we still have the ladies to go. So we might be seeing a little different strategies as well, knowing these guys know what their ladies can do with those movements as well. Some of these guys might need to give their ladies a little more time, or sometimes some of these ladies might be the cleanup crew to kind of come in and sweep up.
Yeah. Well, and think about pacing within this, as you know, as the men are on the back half of this. Again, we'll say a pyramid style chipper where you come up and come back down. Is Pro1 Montreal, upper left corner of your screen, already to the synchronized deadlift? Is you said they're moving much faster and smoother than maybe they started with. Is this one of those events where you pull back a little on the front half because of the squats, and then once you get through, it's just all go?
I think so, because it is 35 reps as opposed to the 50 that the individuals did. And these movements here, the deadlifts, the push press, or the shoulder to overhead, they're much easier to stay in tempo with as opposed to those squats, as opposed to the GHD sit-ups. They can kind of crank these out, but it's not about how fast you go if you get off tempo and have to take a long rest. Pro1 Montreal is just not taking long breaks. They're really not breaking at all. They just keep moving.
As the men advance to the deadlifts, you see their female counterparts setting up the GHDs for themselves, which is a very smart move, and not having to wait till it's time to actually do the movement to do that. Pro1 Montreal, upper left corner of your screen, taking a break. It looks like they are done with their 35 deadlifts, as they'll move to 35 shoulder to overhead to close things out for their first part of this 2-part team event, as when they finish, it will be the women's turn to tackle this chipper.
I just love their control, Pro1 Montreal, just seeing how methodical they are. I love that they used that rest as a transition, as their rest time, made sure they were ready before they picked it up. And now I'm anxious to see how long they're going to hold on, because CrossFit Resurrection, the top middle of your screen, they're moving pretty quickly with those dumbbells.
Yeah, that cycle rep for the center part of your screen, upper row, CrossFit Resurrection, was a lot faster than Pro1, although they did get off cadence a few times, and that's the risk you run when adding a little too much intensity or haste. As you can see, upper left middle, getting a little out of sync between each other.
Oh, they are, and they have to just wait. They have to find, when that happens, there has to be a backup plan. They have to communicate. We either pause at the top or we wait on the shoulders, but you have to wait for one another.
All teams onto their last set of shoulder overhead, but it will be the left side, Pro1 Montreal, who have the first pairing of their female athletes onto the floor. And it looks like just behind them, or just underneath them on the screen, C2X CrossFit as well. So still a very tight race between 3 teams of Pro1, CrossFit Resurrection, and C2X CrossFit. 1855 is in the mix too.
Chase, here's the hard part. When you are sitting on the sidelines like these women have done for the past 10.5 minutes, you are itching to get out there, and you are watching your men slow down and have missed reps. You want to get in there, you just want to go and crush it. You have to be careful as the ladies, or whoever is that second pair coming through in any of these team events. You got to be careful and just manage that energy and that adrenaline when you come in, because there's a lot of work to do and you have to stay together.
I'm just looking at the top right, these poor guys having to set the GHDs up for their female athletes.
That's the last thing they want to do.
Oh, that was probably not the best decision, but hey,
now,
whatever it takes.
No, but this is what happens. If you were in live competition, the women would have seen that. They would have hustled out and did that, but they're on their own. You have to do the details. Every little bit of the details comes down to the best teams and the best athletes for the CrossFit Games. You have to know every little part, from crossing a line to every transition, and what you need to do so you don't waste reps. Waste time.
if we learned anything from the first week of these virtual competitions, is that understanding the rules and the standards is a very, very important part of this competition, especially when you are by yourself. About a 4-horse race between Pro 1, your whole top row, CrossFit Resurrection 1855, and bottom left, C2X CrossFit. Now, Novative Lab in the middle bottom row is actually last to get to their female part. So Rhapsody had pulled ahead of them towards the tail end of that first men's pairing.
And Rhapsody in the bottom right of the screen, they're cruising on these deadlifts a little faster than what I would expect. This kind of looks like on the way back through the chipper, but man, they were hustling.
35 synchronized GHD sit-ups. As we are approaching the 13-minute mark, if you look at the bottom corner of your screen, that is the current time for this event. This is event number 2 for the team portion of this 2021 Atlas Games. And just to the left of that is the description of the event that they've tackled. The men have already gone through this completely. The women are mostly working through their first set of synchronized GHD sit-ups with those 75 single-arm dumbbell overhead squats waiting. Your top 3 teams on the left side of your screen, Montreal Resurrection and C2X CrossFit. And 1855 at the top right corner of your screen is also in the mix. So still a very tight race. And Tanya, it's not to be overstated, is that it seems normal to have a race like this if they were all in the same place at the same time. But again, that they're so close and there's little to no separation, yet they don't have any clue where each other are. I think it's fascinating to me.
You literally took the words out of my mouth, and I'm like, do I say it again? I feel like that's all we keep talking about is the races. But I'm like, but man, I wish I was seeing these guys live. How would they change? How would they shorten their rest time if they were side by side? Because I can't believe how this looks when they don't even know what the other teams are doing. It's awesome. It is so cool to see.
And again, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm impressed with just CrossFit Resurrection, the way these ladies are just staying controlled in the bottom of their squat. They really have their pacing down so nicely. This is a hard movement with the individuals doing this for 100 reps. I think 75 is harder because this timing, they just can't go as fast as they want. They have to pause, and it's so much more fatiguing in the shoulders.
And think of what they just did already is they did a friendly Fran version with all 4 team members of thrusters and bar facing burpees. So if you and chest to bar pull-ups. So it's not that they're coming in fresh with the shoulder fatigue. They're coming in quite fatigued with more shoulder fatigue. So it's even more impressive that they can keep these positions and this cadence in another synchronized style event.
And I wonder if CrossFit Resurrection top middle screen will do it again, but they kind of did a little kettlebell swing when they did their transition. Here it goes. And then they switch to the other. Just so technically sound right there.
That was fancy.
It was very fancy, but that's practice. That they knew that they were going to do that. And just what a time saver those couple seconds are. If you can sustain that and not take that break, don't do it.
As we try to really see who's pulling away, no one has done it yet after 3 movements. We'll see if we have any separation after these 75 overhead squats. But if you look at the top part of every box, you have that red progress bar. And if we read it correctly, Pro1 Montreal on the left corner of your screen, upper left corner, is the first off the dumbbells. And we may have a decent separation for the first time in nearly 16 minutes.
So methodical through each part. They're men, now they're ladies, and this is where we saw the men also just really dial in and just kind of tighten up. The worst movement is out of the way, and now they can just go back through what they already have done.
Bottom left corner of your screen, C2X CrossFit onto the 35 GHDs just above them. CrossFit Resurrection. So now a clear 1, 2, 3. It goes Pro1 Montreal, upper left corner. Below them in C2X CrossFit, and then top middle CrossFit Resurrection. As we are approaching the 17-minute mark. Now, the time cap for this was 30 minutes. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that time cap. Again, these are your top 6 teams after team event number 1. And the upper right side of your screen, 18:55 now done with their overhead squats as they'll make their way to 35 synchronized GHD sit-ups.
Rhapsody in the lower right-hand box, Chase, they're doing that same strategy that we saw the men with that one athlete in front, one behind. So it definitely was a team strategy doing it that way.
Pro1 Montreal, left corner of your screen, done with the GHD sit-ups and moving very quickly through the second 35 synchronized dumbbell deadlifts as they are pulling away from the rest of the field, but C2X CrossFit in the bottom left corner of your screen is not going away just yet. All the men's pair have already gone through this entire portion. Same rep scheme, same movements, just a different weight. Pro1 Montreal was first to the dumbbells, and they have yet to relinquish that lead as CrossFit Resurrection in the upper middle row and C2X CrossFit in the bottom left row are trying to keep pace. The battle looks like it's going to be for second because Pro1 Montreal is already to the shoulder overhead. 35 reps, 35 pounds apiece, and that red progress bar at the top part of their box is getting bigger and bigger as their lead matches that up.
They had another really fast transition from the deadlifts, and they're through 15. Are they going to hold on for all of them? I would be shocked if they do. Oh, there we go.
And there's the good old announcer's curse.
Just around 20 reps is where they're at. I don't know if that last rep counted because the athlete on the left-hand screen, I don't know if she got fully locked out.
Pro1 Montreal. Looks like they just have a few reps remaining. And it's not going to be enough for Resurrection or C2X CrossFit to catch him. So Pro1 will take one more break and just a handful of reps left to go. And with an unofficial time of 19:43, Pro1 Montreal will take first in this grouping of your top 6 teams after event number 1. And Tony, like I said, is if the wheels aren't coming off in the last 5 reps after something like this, were you really going as hard as you should have?
Yeah, and if they're not, then when you rewatch this, you're going to be kicking yourself because you know if you were side by side, you would have down.
Battle for second between C2X CrossFit on the bottom left corner of your screen and CrossFit Resurrection. And it looks like it's going to be C2X CrossFit just over that 20-minute mark. Unofficial time of 20:19. They'll take second in this grouping as CrossFit Resurrection just has a few reps to go. And the only other team on the shoulder overhead, it looks like 18:55 just to the right as CrossFit Resurrection will finish in third in this group. Rhapsody in the bottom right corner of your screen just got to the last 35 reps, and just to their left, Novative Lab still on their deadlifts.
One thing we didn't mention was the shoulder to overhead, so it is faster to do the push press, but man, when your shoulders are tired, you want to be able to drop under and save your shoulders, use your legs, but I can't say their legs are probably feeling that great and to do that. Sometimes it actually is worse. If you remember the qualifier, just that push press.
That was so hard.
Same way.
That was so hard.
It was like, I don't want to push press, but I kind of need to. I'm going to drop them because I can't stabilize to re-dip. So I also wonder if some of that's going on with these athletes as well.
It's a close race between 18:55 on the top right and Rhapsody on the bottom right, but it looks like 18:55 will do just enough to hold off Rhapsody. Unofficial time 21:36 and just 9 seconds behind them. Rhapsody at 21:45, and all that there's left is Novative Labs to finish out your top 6 from event number 1. And as we finish event number 2, it's going to be different. And that's the fun part about the volatility of day number 1, Tanya, right? You have these huge swings on the leaderboard when there's only 2 events up for grabs.
Oh yeah, I mean there's so much left in this competition. So this is just day 1, but so much more to come. But 2 very different events here in day 1. So much fun to watch.
Novative Lab taking another break. Again, the time cap is 30 minutes, nowhere near in danger of getting capped. But again, as we said, as they had a good, strong finish in event number 1, and this looks like a bit of damage control in event number 2. And that'll do it for Novative Labs at 22:53, but it was all Pro1 Montreal for the team event 2 for your top 6 grouping.
Pro1 Montreal, another event win. They win by nearly a minute over CrossFit Resurrection, who finishes second again. And then it's 18:55 in third again. Overall standings after 2 events, after day 1, Pro1 Montreal, they are perfect. 200 out of a possible 200 points. CrossFit Resurrection sits in second at 190, and then it's 18:55 in third, with Rhapsody and C2X CrossFit rounding out the top 5 and hanging on to those last 2 spots to the CrossFit Games. And when you look at those top 3 teams, no surprise, their rosters are loaded.
Right, they all have really strong individuals on these teams. So Resurrection has a Masters athlete that actually already punched his ticket to the Games, and then another athlete that turned down their semi-qualifier invitation. In 18:55, they had 2 female athletes, so both their female athletes turned down semi-qualifier invitations. So definitely some strong individuals filling up these rosters.
Last week at the Brazil CrossFit Championship, we almost watched Formix Brazil stay perfect through 6 events. Right now, Pro1 Montreal might be able to make a run at that?
Definitely, and I wouldn't be surprised, Sean. They added Games vet Chloe Galvin David back onto their roster, and this was an already very strong team. In both events, so event 1 and 2, they were almost 30 seconds faster than the second place team. So they're not just winning, they're absolutely dominating. And I think, like you said, it would not surprise me to see a performance like Formix last weekend, which had all first and second place finishes.
It's been impressive so far to watch Pro1 Montreal. They have been dominant, but 4 events remain at the Atlas Games. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our coverage and our featured matchups for events 1 and 2 for the individuals at the Atlas Games, and we will also have a full day recap and highlights from both the West Coast Classic and the CrossFit Asia Invitational. For Andy Sakamoto, I'm Sean Woodland. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to keep checking in on the CrossFit Games YouTube channel and on the Facebook page for all of our coverage surrounding the 2021 Noble CrossFit Games semifinals.